All right. And we are live on Facebook and on YouTube this evening. Thanks for everyone for joining in. We're going to give just a minute for people to get on. I know it takes a second to get everybody live. So we are coming to you live from both Virginia and Texas tonight. So I'm glad we got to do this. We are definitely in the good season of vegetables right now in Virginia. So I'm glad, Angi Schneider, that you were able to join us to share a little bit of information about your new book, but also to give us a little demonstration of what's in there as well. I'm going to do just a quick introduction of Angi for everybody tuning in, and then I will turn things over to her. Angi Schneider has been gardening and preserving food for more than 25 years. She's the creator of Schneider Peeps, which you can find at schneiderpeeps.com, a great blog about her family and all the work you guys are doing out there. She's also written for Countryside Magazine. She lives on a 1.5 acre homestead with her family on the Gulf Coast of Texas. So she's definitely in a different growing season than we are here in Virginia right now, which is why I'm also glad that later in the hour we're going to have a local farmer join us to be able to share a little bit more about what's in season here and maybe offer some of her own tips. So how this works tonight, I'm going to drop off here for a minute, and let Angi take over. But folks who are on Facebook and on YouTube, feel free if you have questions throughout the hour to go ahead and put those in the comments, and we will get to as many of those as we can. Obviously talking about veggies, what's in season, and how we can preserve those so we can enjoy them for at least the next few months. All right. So I'm going to turn things over to Angi in her kitchen in Texas.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber. It is such a privilege to be here with you and with your bookstore. And I'm just excited. This is one of the neat things about the time that we live in, that we can come from Virginia and Texas and wherever else people are from, and talk about something that should be a priority for all of us, which is feeding our family healthy food. And I think especially now that has become a priority for more and more people. When people talk about preserving food or not preserving food, a lot of times it can be very intimidating. And I just want to assure people that you have been preserving food probably your entire life. Every time you toss something into the freezer, you have preserved it for later. And so I would like for you to keep that in mind, that you've already been doing this. So what we're going to talk about tonight is maybe how to expand on that knowledge that you already have and the things that you're already doing, with the goal, not necessarily, some people's goal will be to provide all of their fruits and vegetables and meat for their whole family all the time. That's not usually the goal for most of us. Most of us just really want to provide healthy foods for our family and do it the most economical way. And one of the most economical ways to do that is to use everything that you have. So if you get carrots from the local farmer's market or in your casa, your CSA box, and it has the greens on it, instead of composting those greens, there are lots of things that you can do with them. You can turn them into pesto. You can dehydrate them and use them and, add them to your eggs or to your smoothies even, or rice or whatever. I sprinkle that. We call it green powder, and I just sprinkle it on everything. And so it's really easy to do. It doesn't have to be super time consuming. And so I really want to put people at ease on that. The things that are in my book are very doable for people who are just starting out. So there are 4 main types of preservation methods. And the first one is canning. Most people are very familiar with canning. And I talked with Amanda earlier from the farm, and she suggested that I go through the preservation methods and some of the supplies that you need. And so this is a pressure canner, and it's really just a big pot that has a rack in it. To be honest, you can use any big pot, and even if it doesn't have a rack, and just put a kitchen towel at the bottom to keep the jars up off the bottom of the pot. You just need to make sure that the pot is tall enough to cover your jars by an inch or two of water. To can, you need canning jars. These are big, wide mouth ones, and these are called regular mouth ones, and they come in a variety of sizes. These are one-time purchases, really, because they are reusable. You need lids. When you buy jars new, they'll come with lids. If you're able to maybe find some jars and someone's added, they're not using anymore, then you'll have to buy lids. And metal lids are a one-time use lid. They come with you can buy the lids by themselves. The rings you can use multiple times. And so, but then there's also these plastic lids. There's a couple of companies that make these, and they are reusable. They're a little different. They're a little fussy, but if you do a lot of canning, they're really worth the cost. You can buy a little kit that has a jar lifter in it, which is really nice because you don't want to put your hands down in that hot boiling water to get your jars out. And even though this canner has a rack, that rack can get really heavy when you've got 7 full quart-sized jars in it. The kit usually has a funnel, and it fits on both size jars, which is really nice. And it also has something called a bubble remover or headspace measurer. I can't find mine. I haven't been able to find it all season. So instead of that, I'm using a chopstick, which is very handy to have in the kitchen for other than eating, and a plastic ruler from our local bank. And so my goal is to show you that you don't have to have specific canning things. You can use some things in your kitchen to do some canning. The water bath canning you can use for anything that's high acid, so jams, jellies, fruits, pickles can all be water bath canned. Some tomato products can be water bath canned. If you want to do a lot of canning of vegetables or soups or meat, you really need a pressure canner. And this is the pressure canner. It's kind of heavy, and this is a big one. It will hold 2 stacks of quart-sized jars. Starting out, you don't need one that big. If you do buy a used one, you need to have the seal checked, and you need to have the gauges checked. The gauge, you need to have it checked. Usually, your local county extension agent can do that for you or tell you where to get that done. It's super important. If you want to dehydrate, dehydrating is super easy, and you don't have to have a fancy dehydrator. You can use your stove. Makes a good dehydrator. Especially if you leave the door cracked a little bit. But if you want to buy a dehydrator, this one is pretty inexpensive. And I actually found this one at a garage sale years ago for like $10. So look at garage sales before you go invest in a whole bunch of fancy stuff. After we've dehydrated, I really like to store our dehydrated goods in these mason jars. And so out of all the canning supplies that you can use, you need mason jars because you can do every single preservation method in them. And so keep your eye out as you're going along at garage sales or thrift stores for good prices on mason jars, and just gather them up. Even if they're dirty and they've been in someone's barn, you can scrub them with some barkeeper spring and they'll be great. Freezing, we already talked about a little bit. Ziploc bags were good for freezing. You just want to make sure to get all the air out. Vegetables, most vegetables need to be blanched before they're frozen, or it's recommended that they be blanched. And so the same thing with dehydrating vegetables. Most of them do need to be blanched. So that's something that's in the book, and that's something that you can find more information about. You can also freeze in mason jars. I do that a lot. And then years ago, I asked my father-in-law, he asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I asked him to get me a food saver. And so this is really nice. I don't use it a lot, but I do use it some. I use it for things that are going to be in the freezer for a long time, 6 months or longer. I also use it to seal these jars when I have dehydrated food in them that's going to be in the jar for 3 months or longer. And so it's got a handy little attachment that you can use to seal up your jars. It's really important to store your preserved food properly so that you don't waste it. For things that either have a lot of liquid in them or things that are not only going to be in the freezer for a few months. I just use Ziploc baggies because the bags that come with that food saver are really pricey. So I try to reserve those for things that are going to be in the freezer for a long time, or that are really dry and the ice crystals might form on, because you don't want ice crystals on your frozen food. The last preservation method is actually one of the oldest preservation methods known to man, and it's one of the ones that we in our culture do the least of, probably, and that is fermentation. Some popular fermented foods that most people know and like would be yogurt, which is a fermented dairy product, fermented milk, and sauerkraut. Now, not the pickled sauerkraut that's got vinegar in it, but the cultured sauerkraut, the original sauerkraut that's made with salt and a salt brine. What fermentation does, out of all the preservation methods, it actually adds nutrition into your food. All these other methods take nutrition away, but fermentation adds it in. Fermentation is different than pickles. It's a natural pickling process. If you don't like pickles, you might actually like fermented vegetables because the flavor is different and it's not as sharp as vinegar is. So my husband does not like anything with vinegar in it. In fact, he'll leave the house when I can pickles, but he loves peppers. And so for years, he just put up with pickled peppers when we didn't have any fresh in the garden. But then once I started fermenting them, he realized that he did like them. He liked them so much better than pickled ones because it doesn't have that sharp flavor. And so I want to encourage you to try fermentation. It's going to taste different than pickles. If you love pickles, you need to adjust your expectations a little bit because the flavor is a little bit different. But if you don't like that sharp vinegar flavor, then you will probably enjoy fermented vegetables. To ferment vegetables, you don't need a lot. So traditionally, people would use big crocks with a lid on it and a place to add water because it creates an airlock system. Those crocks are really pricey, and so $80 to $100 pricey for a 1 gallon crock. So what I like to do is I like to use these mason jars. Okay, wide mouth mason jars. And there's several companies that have different attachments that go with them. I do want you to know that you don't have to have these lids and weights. You can use things from your house. You can use a Ziploc baggie filled with water as a weight and put a cover over it. But what I have found is that these are worth the investment because it takes a lot of the user error away and I have more consistent ferments. So we'll start with a wide mouth jar. And then I really like this. It's called an Easy Fermenter. And this little button here is what creates this airlock. And I really like it. For years before getting these, the last couple of years, I used these, which are similar to what you would use for winemaking. And there's a metal lid that goes on the jar, and you stick that in the metal lid. The problem with this for me, and it is completely a user error problem, is that my kitchen is very, very, very busy, and these would tend to get knocked over. And then once air gets in there, the likelihood of mold developing is higher. And so I would wind up having ferments go bad, not because they were bad themselves, but because the air got into there, the oxygen got in and created a layer of mold on top of my weight. And it was very disappointing. And so since using these, I have not had that problem because there's nothing to knock off. So I do think these are definitely worth the investment if you're starting out. But if you this is all you have and you're not irresponsible like me and it works for you, then for sure, definitely keep using it. So the way fermentation works is you make a saltwater brine, and in that brine, it inhibits bad bacteria growth and it encourages good bacteria growth. The bacteria is coming from the vegetable itself. There's already all kinds of bacteria on vegetables that's both good and bad. And so when you wash your vegetables, you really, if you're going to ferment them, you don't need to scrub them. You just need to rinse them off and they'll be fine. And then that bacteria is what's going to grow. It creates an acidic environment. So things like botulism are not going to grow in it because it's acidic environment. Okay. And also you're going to keep everything under the brine. And so it's going to be safe. I know people in our culture, when we say, oh, I made fermented, peppers or whatever, people think you mean fermented as in bad or like sour, like rotten food, but it's not rotten food. It's really, really good food. So the other thing you need for fermenting is you need some kind of weight. And these weights came with my Easy Fermenter lid, and I really like them because I can pull them out, but they're really thick. So sometimes if I put a lot of stuff in here, especially pickles, like if I'm doing cucumbers, then putting this, it's nice to have a thin weight to stick on there because everything has to be underneath the brine. That is the most important thing with fermenting vegetables is that all the stuff, all the vegetable solids have to be under the brine in order for it to be safe, okay, or not grow mold. And so let's talk about the salt and the water. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of different fermenting type groups about the best salt to use for fermenting. And like I said before, people have been fermenting for thousands of years, and they didn't worry about the salt. They used a natural salt that didn't have anything added to it. And that's what you need. You need a salt that doesn't have anything added to it. So sea salt is fine as long as it doesn't have any anti-caking agents in it. It doesn't have any iodine added to it. So table salt, you look on the back. If it just says salt, it's okay. If it says salt and anti-caking or iodine or anything else, it's not okay. There's a lot of people who suggest that you only should use Himalayan pink salt for your ferments, and it's the best. And I think that we're able to have that conversation because we live in a culture where we can get that relatively easily if we're willing to pay for it. But 1,000 years ago, people didn't. They used the salt that they had. And so I want to encourage you to use what salt you have available. And don't get too hung up on exactly the best salt for your ferment. Try different ones and see what you like. And that is the good thing about fermenting in these mason jars is that you can do really small batches and try different things. And I would encourage you to do that. The other thing is the water that you want to use. The number one thing for your water is it needs to not be chlorinated. So if you live in town and you're on city water, you probably need to go buy water from the store, like a drinking water or a spring water, in order to ferment, because the chlorine kills bacteria, and you want your bacteria to grow in your ferments because that's the good bacteria growing. Chlorine doesn't know what's good and what's bad. And so if you're on well water, some people, well water is not good for fermenting. It's got too many other minerals in it. I'm going to say we're on well water, and we also have a water softener that uses salt, and I use our water just fine for ferments. But I tried it out at first in small batches. So try it and see what works for you. If your ferments turn out really mushy, then change your water, change your salt ratio. Try different things until it turns out the way that you like it. And fermenting, of all the preservation methods, fermenting is a science, yes, but it also is an element of art in that there's a huge leeway of the time that you're going to ferment, how strong of a brine you want or don't want. And there's some variables such as, what kind of salt you use or what is already naturally in your water, in the water that you use. So I want to encourage you to do small amounts and try different things and until you find something that you like. Because I am convinced my husband will eat, and it's the only fermented food he'll eat, but it is one thing that he'll eat. And so if he will eat that, I'm convinced that there is a fermented vegetable for everyone, even if it's only one. And so we are going to ferment peppers, and I want to talk just a moment about peppers. Here in Texas right now, we pretty much have peppers and okra growing in our garden as far as produce goes, because it's hot here. But these 3 peppers were all picked from the same bush. They're little serrano peppers. And we have one that's not ripe. And this is what normally when you buy peppers at the grocery store, you're going to see. If it's green, it's not a ripe pepper yet, okay? This purple one, it's turning from green to red. So it's midway ripening. And this red one is a fully ripe pepper. We have another bush out there called a lemon something. It's a sweet pepper. And it's a pretty yellow one. So you can see it's starting to turn. And I tell you this because ripe peppers don't increase the heat of the pepper, but they do increase the flavor of the pepper. And so, so if you like green peppers, that's great. Harvest your peppers green, your bush will produce more. But play around with maybe doing letting some go a little longer and seeing if you like that flavor better. It just really intensifies the flavor. Also, if you're going to save seeds, you always want to make sure that they're fully ripe before you harvest the seeds. Okay, so the peppers, what we're going to do is we're going to put the peppers in the jar first, see how much we have. And these were pre-cut. And my lovely husband, I don't like cutting spicy peppers because they make my hands sting a little bit. And so he doesn't seem to be bothered by that like I do. If you're doing a lot of peppers, you might want to wear gloves. If you're doing a lot of spicy peppers, you can do sweet peppers the same way. Okay. And it's not super full, and that's okay. We can, we'll ferment what we have, and then when they're done fermenting, we just pour them into a jar in the refrigerator that maybe isn't quite full, so that we don't have, 15 jars of peppers in the refrigerator. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our brine. And there's a little bit of math that happens when you make your brine. So I'm going to use this kitchen scale that has grams on it. And I'm going to measure, I'm going to zero it out and then measure my water in grams. Okay. I'm going to do 400 just to make it easy for calculating. Okay, so for peppers, you can have anywhere between a 2 to 3% brine. Different vegetables have a different percentage of brine that they do well in. Most do well between 2 and 3%. So again, that's something that you're going to have to just play with a little bit. The book has recommendations of what I use. And it also has recommendations if you don't have a scale on how to calculate, how to figure out how much salt and saltwater brine you need. So don't worry about that if you don't have a scale. Okay, so we have 400. Let's see. We have 400 grams, and so we multiply it by 0.025, and that's 10 grams of salt that we need. So I'm going to get a thing here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add, so I know my scale needs to be at 410 grams, which is about a teaspoon and a half of salt. I'm going to mix it up real well with my handy dandy chopsticks. See, it is super duper important to have chopsticks laying around your kitchen for all kinds of fun things. Okay. Once that's mixed well, then you just pour it on top. Use your chopstick again to kind of remove air bubbles like you do when you're canning. Okay. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to slip on my weight. You'll see it pushes everything down. And you can remove, I'm going to add a little bit more water here. You can remove the seeds that float up on top. then I do remove some of them, but I have not found, it's never been a huge deal. These seeds have never gone like, have never mildewed on me, grown mold. So I don't worry too much if seeds are floating on the surface, but I do try to remove them because I know that you're supposed to have everything under the brine, seeds included. So we're going to remove most of them. They're a little tricky. Okay. So then we just put our, whatever lid that you're going to use, you put that on. One of the things I like about this lid is it has a timer. So not a timer, like a little dial that has 0 through or 1 through 31. So today's the 4th, and we like to have our peppers, we like to ferment them for about a week. You can do anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. The flavor gets stronger as the days go on. And so after about 5 days, I would suggest that you try them, open it up and try them and see if you like it. So I'm going to put this on 11. And then I know that on the 11th, it's time for me to open this up and have my husband try them and make sure they're the texture and all of that he wants. If it is, then what we do is we remove the lid and remove the weight, and I put one of these storage lids on, and then it goes in our refrigerator. Where I live, nobody has cellars, nobody has basements. I don't know if they do in Virginia or not, but we don't. So all of our ferments need to have to stay in a refrigerator. So we just put them in our outside refrigerator. This is some peppers that we made it several weeks ago and that we've been eating on. And you can see that the brine is cloudy, and that's a good thing. It's not going to be fermented. Vegetables are not going to be clear like pickled vegetables are. The brine is not going to be clear. The cloudy is telling you that the bacteria has started to grow, and it's a good thing. As long as they smell good, you'll know if a ferment's bad because it will smell really bad. As long as they smell good, and as long as there's no mold anywhere on there, they're totally safe to eat, okay? If you do see mold, do not just scoop it off and eat them anyway. Go ahead and discard them. And I know that that's sad, and I know that people sometimes will can and just scoop off the moldy parts, maybe because grandma did, but it's really not safe, and it's really not worth the risk. So that's it. I think when you store these, you're supposed to store them in a dark cabinet, but I would forget about them. So you might be a little bit more responsible than me and can do that. But so what I do is I just put them over here on my side counter over here by my sink, and I just cover it. Okay. And so this way I'll remember. And usually I have a whole stack of 4 or 5 different jars going at the same time. And so I'll know I just check on them every once in a while and make sure that if I'm supposed to be checking the date, if today's the day that I check it. So I think that's it, unless anyone has any questions.
Angie, thanks. You actually answered the question. The first question I was going to ask you was about storing, because some of us do have basements, but not. I don't have a basement the way I did growing up in Ohio, where I definitely had the cellar. And so that was my question: was how should you store things? So the refrigerator, if you don't have.
Yes. So we just have an outside refrigerator, and the reason I put the plastic lid on, I know a lot of people don't like plastic, but when things are being stored a long time, and especially if you need that brine, because remember it's acidic, gets up, touches like a plastic or a metal canning lid, you could just put one of those on. It'll start to corrode. And so you really don't want that. If you're going to use the metal lid, you need to put a piece of plastic wrap or saran wrap down first and then put this on there. But I have found even the humidity of my refrigerator makes these rust some. So I just prefer, these are really cheap. And so for me, they work really well.
Okay, great. I've never seen those before. So that's very good to know. I'm ready to bring Amanda in here. Let's see. I think she is ready as well. Here's Amanda Day. And I will do a quick introduction for Amanda as well. And Angie, we will keep discussing this, so stay right there. Amanda Day and her husband Stephen operate Starstead Farm in Culpeper County, Virginia. Any locals that are tuning in tonight may have met her at one of our local farmers markets here in Arlington. They bring their veggies to Westover Farmers Market on the weekends. They produce a wide variety of interesting and flavorful organic vegetables, as well as seedlings for home gardens. They also maintain a flock of laying hens. So in addition to farmers markets, Starstead Farms also offers a CSA membership. And I'm so glad. We really wanted to have this local voice to be able to talk a little bit about what's in season here in Virginia. So Amanda, I'm so glad you were able to join us. You want to just tell us a little bit about your farm and what you guys do? I don't know if Amanda's on.
I hope you can hear me. Your video is breaking up a little bit.
We can hear you. I think you're on a little bit of delay, but go right ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Amanda and I operate Starstead Farm in Westover, Virginia with my husband. It's a very small farm, only an acre, so we don't have quite the abundance as some of the bigger farms that you'll find at farmers markets around the area. But we do grow pretty much every vegetable, and this time of year is great for lots of different vegetables that you might preserve through fermenting or canning. And local farmers markets are a wonderful place to buy food, especially in large quantities. You know, there's a lot of farmers that offer discounts on food when there's times of great abundance. You can get second, which is basically a farmer term for damaged vegetables that are slightly damaged but still usable, and you can just cut off the damage and use the good part. So farmers markets are a great place to and talk to the person who's actually growing the food and see if you could get a deal on some bulk produce when it's really abundant. So in August, it's a great month for all sorts of summer vegetables. I know in Texas, it sounded like your season was coming to an end there, or maybe it's just too hot to grow stuff. But here we have tons of vegetable and fruit available. So it's a great time for summer crops like tomatoes, summer squash, peppers of all varieties, green beans, cucumbers, eggplant, okra, onion, basil, lots of other herbs. And so then in fall, September and October actually are the most abundant times of the whole year in Virginia, because you still have all of the summer stuff coming in, which usually goes until mid-October or so. The summer start to trail off in October, but you still have until a frost. Pretty much farmers are bringing tomatoes, peppers, and all of that stuff. But you also have all your root crops coming in, like beets, turnips, carrots, radishes, storage radishes, which are all great things for fermenting or even pickling. And then all of your beans come then too. So if you ever were interested in fruit blanching and freezing kale or collards or anything like that, it's a great time of year to do that. So I would say if you're interested in getting into preserving, it's a great time to do it. And you should definitely check out your local markets to see what they have available. And then I wanted to just share one link that if you're in the DC area, which I'm sure there's a market finder on the Washington Post website. If you look up farmers markets in the Washington area, you can actually enter in your zip code and find markets on different days of the week in our area, because we have a ton. And I think on
we're losing Amanda a little bit there, but I will pull up that link and I'll add it in comments,
especially weekend,
so anybody can find that.
use that to.
Sorry, Amanda. We thought we had our connection all worked out. I'm going to see if she can come back in. In the meantime, Angie, I was going to ask you for the fermenting that you just demonstrated, some of the veggies that Amanda just talked about. Are there any others from that list that you would recommend that would be really good for this process?
Oh yeah, carrots are great fermented. So are cucumbers. Another one that I really like is cauliflower. Or tomatoes, like little cherry tomatoes, especially if you come up to a frost or your first freeze and you have a lot of little cherry tomatoes, you can ferment those. They're really tasty. So there's a lot, almost every vegetable can be fermented in some way.
Great. And Amanda, I think we have you back. I did mention that I would find that Washington Post link and add it in comments so everybody can find that. And we just asked Angie of some of those vegetables that you went through, which would be some that would also be really good at going through the fermenting process. So you're caught up. Was there something else you wanted to talk about tonight, Amanda?
Sorry, you're breaking up and I couldn't hear your question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. I know what Amanda or Angie, I was going to ask you in your book, when you started the evening, you went through, some of the tools and things that people might want to use. Do you cover that, including hey, you should try a garage sale for this in the book?
Yes, because I am super scrappy. And most of these things, like I said, are one-time purchases. So I actually have a copy of the book with me. And the first section of the book is all 4 of these different preservation methods, including all the supplies that you need, what are optional, what to use in case you can't, you can't find your bubble remover for the whole canning season, what to do instead. And truly, when I say that this is an amazing tool for both cooking, preserving, and sewing. We use it when we sew too. So, so those are all in the book. And then the second portion of the book is all the vegetables in alphabetical order. And it has tips for growing, for buying them from your farmer's market. That is always our first place to look for things that we don't grow, is our local farmer's market. And then every vegetable has at least 4 recipes, some of them up to 10 recipes covering the various preservation methods that are good for those vegetables. So there's no fermenting broccoli because it's really gross. So we didn't put it in there. So,
are there any vegetables that have surprised you that you've been able to preserve in any of these ways?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most is, so one of my things that I really like to do is preserve meals. So I do a lot of canning of soups or meals in a jar. But I also, in June is when our heyday of the summer produce is, and we're swamped with summer squash. And so I make a frozen summer squash soup, which is really nice. And that surprised me how much my family liked it, because I enjoy cream-style soups that my family is not, I could have soup every day and they're just not like that. They want meat and potatoes. So that really surprised me. But I think that when you have those vegetables, and you really want to preserve them in a way that is useful to you later. I mean, you can only have so many jellies and pickles around. And so the bulk of my book is really about how to do it in a way that saves you time later when you're trying to get dinner on the table. So
that sounds very helpful. Amanda, and sorry, I'm making a noise out here. So Amanda, it looks like you're back. We did hear from you about the farm finder. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, either about farmers markets or about your farm, or any other tips you might have?
Sorry, I couldn't hear your question very well.
Oh, Amanda, I'm so sorry. Let me.
Sorry.
I know we tested this a couple times. We were hopeful it was going to work so well. Let me see. Let me try this. Although I don't think, I remember, Amanda, you're on your phone, so you may not even be able to see the written question. Yeah. Amanda, I'm so sorry. We were so happy to be able to have you. I'm glad we did get most of what you wanted to share in. Just unfortunately with this. Sorry, now I'm on a different screen. All right. Angie, what else do you guys talk about on the blog? I was very interested in Schneider. Was it Schneider Peaks?
Yes, it is a terrible blog name. I'm well aware of that. I saw you smile just a little bit when you said it. It started years ago, and it was really just a family blog, a way of me to keep up with. I had a baby, so I have a 15-year gap between my oldest and youngest child, and 7 years between my two youngest ones. And so I had a baby, and I was struggling with my 5 older kids and a baby, and trying to keep up with family and friends. And I didn't want to do Facebook and social media and all that because it was overwhelming. So I just started this blog, and my kids were like, we should call it Schneider Peeps, you know? And so we did. And I probably should have changed it as I've changed direction a little bit. My kids have gotten older, but that would be a lot of work. So I don't. But we talk about a lot of growing and preserving food. Also a lot about using what you have. What is available to you? You know, instead of trying to find the best and import the best from wherever, what is provided locally for you that you can use? That is super, super important to me. And, you know, and taking a little bit of responsibility for the food that we eat, even if it's just growing a few herbs in a windowsill, I think that's really important for people to have those skills. We talk about, there are some crafting things on my site because I do enjoy sewing and crafting. So there are some posts with that in there. We talk a lot about just what does simple living mean, and what does it mean to you, and does it really matter, and what are the benefits of it? And I guess maybe a better term would be intentional living. You know, slowing down and really being intentional with our time and our finances and what we choose to say yes to. All of those things I think are really important for our culture to stop just spinning our wheels and going, because that's what we do. And so it's very interesting that during this time of the pandemic, we kind of had to stop spinning our wheels and just go, whew, well, I have to stay home for 2 weeks, you know? And so what are we going to do? And but all of that is framed around kind of growing and preserving food, but but it has a purpose. And the purpose is not just to have a pantry full of food. The purpose is to spend time with your family. The purpose is to be a blessing to others. Several years ago, Hurricane Harvey came right on top of our town, and we did not get the flooding that Houston got, because, you know, it kind of did a loop-de-loop. It was a weird hurricane, but we got a lot of wind damage, and we were without power for 8 days. And what I found was a lot of our neighbors were not prepared for that. And so a lot of them did not have food, set aside, and the grocery stores weren't open. And so we were able to take our canned soups, and we were able to share them in the neighborhood. And it was a huge blessing for us to be able to do that, to come alongside people and say, it's okay. Like, we're going to be okay. We're all in this together, and we're all going to be okay. And then it's also a huge blessing when, I have a lot of teenagers now. All my 5 older kids are all adults. And when their friends want to come over and in the afternoon and stay for supper, and And I can just say, sure, that's fine. I'll just pull, a jar of soup and we'll have a soup appetizer to go along with our, tacos or whatever. It doesn't matter what we're having. I have something prepared or preserved that we can add to our meal so that everyone is welcome. And so that is the context for me of growing food and preserving food. It's always in the context of hospitality and being there and being inviting of people coming in and sharing, because it's about the people. It's not about the food ever. It's always about the people. And so, so we talk a lot about that on my blog too. Those are kind of the purposes for me.
Yeah, that's great. Amanda, it looks like you're back. Can you hear us?
I'm back. I moved to a different room and I think it might be a little bit better over here. Sorry about that. Hey,
I started outside and ended up moving inside. The mosquitoes were eating me outside. So I'm glad that's better there. So I did want to see if there was anything. Did you want to share any other information, either, farmers market related or anything else about the farm, the CSA, any other tips that you had that you wanted to share?
Sure. I'll just say I think that if you're into food or want to into more into food, then shopping local is great. It's great to do anyway to help your local businesses promote local, but also you get the freshest ingredients. That way, a lot of farmers pick their vegetables the day before bringing it to you. So there's not a lot of transportation involved, not a lot of storage before it gets to you. It's picked right out of the ground, and you're going to get the most nutritious food that way and most delicious food that way. And the other thing that's great about farmers markets is you get lots of interesting varieties of things that you might not find in the store. Like peppers is an example, but tomatoes, just lots of interesting things that you're probably not going to be able to find in the grocery store. Like one of my favorite things to pickle actually in can is kohlrabi. Is something you're probably, I guess some grocery stores have it now, but it's not super popular in the store. So you can definitely do more interesting things if you shop at farmers markets. And then I guess my one preserving tip that I've been using in the last couple of years is freezing tomatoes whole is really easy and probably the easiest way you could preserve anything. And it's what we do in the middle of the season because we're so busy. We don't often have time to make sauce and can it, or we feel like we don't have time. So we just core the tomatoes and pop them in a freezer bag and then use them for soups and sauces in the winter. So if you're short on time, you can always just toss stuff in the freezer or blanch it first, I guess, some of them. But tomatoes are a great one to just put in there with not a lot of work. So that's one of our favorites for sure.
Awesome. That's great.
That's good. Amanda, I'm an anti-blancher. I don't blanch unless I absolutely have to, meaning my family cares. It doesn't matter what the recommendation is because it's a quality recommendation, not a safety recommendation. And so if my family doesn't care, I don't blanch at all.
Angie, I was going to ask just a little bit about, can you tell us a little bit about how the book came about?
Sure. I have had this on my heart for a long time. And so I, years and years ago, I read a book, almost 30 years ago, called the Victory Garden Cookbook. My husband bought it for me right after we first got married, and I still have it. And it's based on an old PBS show, The Victory Garden, which I've never seen, but I love this cookbook. And I learned so much. It probably has 1,000 recipes in it, and it has all kinds of information. And so I, as someone who didn't grow up cooking, I had no idea really how to cook. And so as I started talking to people, especially over the last maybe 5 years since I've really been sharing a lot of preserving and growing stuff on my blog, that other people are in the same way with preserving that I was with cooking. And so I thought, you know what, there really needs to be a preservation book that's listed by vegetable and not by method. Because when tomatoes are coming in, I don't want to flip through 5 different books or 5 different sections of one book trying to figure out what to do with them. Or same thing with, cucumbers, whatever. I want it all in one section. So I can just have all the knowledge right there. And so, so I kind of had an outline. And then in 2017, I pitched it to a publisher, and they rejected it. Or, they don't really reject it. They just don't ever contact you back. So then at the beginning of 2019, I had a friend who had just published with Page Street, and she had mentioned my book to her editor, my book idea. And then we got in contact after that. And then, so I spent 2019 writing the book from like the end of April through the end of August, right during our gardening season. So last year was the worst garden I've ever had. So, but that's really.
You were producing something else.
Yeah, it was. And I'm so thankful now. It's really nice to have all my favorite recipes in one book. So, but that was experience. Experience with Page Street was really great. They sent photographers to my house. So all the pictures in there are here in my home with food that I actually made. But they sent a photographer and a food stylist to take the pictures. And that was an amazing experience in and of itself. But it was, and I only share this because I know that a lot of people who visit bookstores would love to write a book. And it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be on a lot of different levels. And so I've had some friends ask me if I'm going to write another book. And I'm like, yeah, not yet, not right now. We'll see. I got to recuperate still from this one. So,
is there a topic that you'd want to do another one on?
I would really like. There's a couple. One is I would like to do a fruit book that's similar to this one. Mm-hmm. And then I would really like to do one on simple living, and but in kind of in the context we talked about earlier about it being intentional, and like my definition of simple living is may or may not be yours. We raise chickens and bees and keep a garden and canned food, and that may not be your definition of simple living. Your simple living may be different, but I think there's commonalities of them, meaning that you can't live a simple life if you're never home. If you're running in chaos 24 hours a day. You can't live a simple life if you are in lots of debt. It just can't happen. So regardless of the things that you do that you call your simple living, I think that the foundation is the same regardless of what those things are. And so I would like to write a book about that. I don't know if there's a market for that book. But those are the things that are on my heart that I would like to share with people.
And you never know, with everything that we've all been going through the last few months, I think a lot of people are rethinking a lot of things. Right. So simple may end up being better for everybody. Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for doing this tonight, and for everybody who was able to tune in. And I know we always have now that we're not doing in-store events, there are definitely the downside of that, not actually getting to see people. But the positive is, we get to reach a lot more people this way. So, we're able to not have to fly you in from Texas. We can bring you in this way. And then we also keep all of these sessions stored on Facebook and on YouTube. So people can tune in whenever it's convenient for them. So, and we've been finding a lot of people doing that afterwards too. So I want to thank you both so much this evening, and thank everybody for tuning in as well. There is a link already there if you want to pick up Angie's book. There's also a link to Starstead Farm. So thank you so much, Amanda. I'm sure I'll be seeing you this weekend or next weekend at the farmers market as well. This is our favorite time to visit our local farmers markets for sure. The best time of year. So thanks again. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Good night.
Good night.